then maybe I will start telling some stories, but I think it's also more interesting if we make it interactive. So if you have questions rather than me just talking, it's probably more useful if we have a discussion. So feel free to interrupt me at any point. And sorry if I look there or here sometimes because the camera is there, but you are here. So it's I guess we are all used to it now. So I'm Alessandro. I'm currently head of product in a company called Data Apparel. It's a smaller company based in Florence, even though we are fully remote. I am in Milan at the moment. It's a company of around 40 people working in the tourism space, and we basically we collect data from a range of different sources. We do some calculations and extract some insights from that data, and then we distribute the data or the insight built on the data either directly through data pack and APIs or through an interface. We have a couple of products that have an interface. There is a company that was founded in 2013. It was acquired last year by a bigger company in Italy, and I joined approximately 1 year ago. As a head of product there, I lead all the product efforts. So I have reporting into me product managers and UX UI designers. We don't have any product marketing, so we were supposed to hire one. We couldn't find it, so you are looking at product marketing as well in this moment. Before, I worked at Musement, obviously to Musement, where I met Jasmine. Also as head of product at the end, and there I was responsible for one of the 3-4 product domains that we had, reporting into me also product managers and UX UI designers. I've been in Musement for almost 2 years overall, 1.5 years through the pandemic. Before that, I was in Amsterdam in Booking.com, where I spent 9 years, well, 8.5 years in total. I started in Italy. Actually, if you know Andrea D'Amico, and if he's ever going to watch this video, ciao Andrea, we met when we were in Italy. And then I moved to Amsterdam at the beginning of a project that for Booking.com was looking after short-term rentals. Basically, you could say the Booking.com version of Airbnb. And there, basically, they were looking for somebody that would bring into product development a view that was more market-oriented, so to speak. Back then, there were only product owners in Booking.com, so it was very, well, I would say old school now, but it wasn't really old school then. It was very much project management, agile organization, and they wanted to become a bit more modern. So there was no role called product manager as such. So when I moved to Amsterdam, the role was actually called commercial owner, which is a terrible idea because obviously then you have the product owner and the commercial owner, which are both owners of the same thing. It's not gonna be a nice discussion to have when you have to make a decision. And so eventually the role basically got split again and became product managers only, essentially. I also did product marketing in Booking as a product marketing manager, and at the end I was responsible for the overall value proposition for Booking.com short-term rental, especially for the professional space. So during this time, it's basically more than 10 years in total. I've been involved in a couple of product launches, both at Booking. Well, at Musement, really with the project that I first started with, I didn't get to see the launch at the end, but I was involved in developing a new app there as well. And also here now in Data Apparel, we are relaunching our product. We are doing 2 things at the moment. We are relaunching our product for, let's say, the hospitality sector. And then we are also integrating, as you might have heard, there is something called ChatGPT that happened in the past few months. And so we had this very new idea of integrating ChatGPT into our product. And so we are also working on making that happen. And that's it. That's basically the introduction. I also have my own podcast called Making Value Podcast, MVP, AHA, which is in English. If you would like to check it out, feel free to do that, obviously. And I have been collaborating with the TAG Talent Garden Innovation School for the Master in Product Management for the past 13 editions. I think I've done 9 or 10 of the overall 13 editions. And that's it. That's the intro, basically.
Good. So I guess we can move on with the questions. The first one, it's pretty easy and simple. So how do you approach the creation of a new product, and how often does it happen in your company, for example?
Yeah, it's not very easy. It's quite complicated because obviously you have inputs from many different sides. I'm going to tell the story of Booking. I'm going to start with Booking because I think maybe it's the most well, for sure, is the example that has the bigger scale. So I was involved in launching a product in Booking that is the first ever quality rating for short-term rentals. So as you might know, hotels have stars, right? So when you go to a hotel, you know if it's a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. There is no star rating system for short-term rentals. The star rating for hotels has nothing to do with the quality, as everybody who stayed in a not so good 3-star hotel would know, but has only to do with the physical characteristics of the hotel, right? If there is a lift or if there is the mini bar, doesn't matter if it's a bad lift, but as long as there is a lift, then you qualify for a certain star rating because it's a measure of the objective features that are available in the hotel. And we've noticed, of course, when we started doing the short-term rental work, we've noticed that people were booking apartments, but they didn't know what they were actually booking. And how did we know this? Because we had a really good relationship with, obviously, some property managers, so partners, basically people that were putting the properties online. So we knew from them that they were experiencing this problem because they would tell us. We also knew from our own customer service, because clearly we tracked in customer service the reason for every call, and we knew that sometimes people were booking apartments and they didn't know. For example, they didn't realize that there was no air conditioning in the apartment, and then they will call Booking to complain. So we had a number of different data sources, and we knew that there was a problem, let's say, around the fact that people did not perceive, people were not able to really perceive the objective quality of what they were booking. And this would lead to friction, which for Booking, of course, is bad because on the one end, you have a less good customer experience, and then you also have cancellations, you have calls to customer service, which is a very big cost. It's not something that you want to have, of course. So we knew there was a problem there. Of course, we didn't know what the solution was, and as always, there are multiple solutions to this problem because we tried to first of all display the information better. For example, I don't know if it's still like this today. I haven't checked recently, but if you look at the property page for a hotel or for a short-term rental property, you will see that the size of the picture is different. For the short-term rental property, all pictures are almost the same size, whilst for the hotels, there is one huge picture and the other ones are small. So that was one attempt to show better what's in the apartment. Also, the list at the bottom that says air conditioning and Wi-Fi and whatever, this is also coming from that same line of thought. So these were all experiments that were measured in conversion increase, right? So when you go full on, you know how it works. Booking, we've done. We were doing a very large number of such experiments. The official figure says 1,000 experiments every 24 hours. So it's a lot of experiments. Of course, not all on the same person, right? But because of the number of people visiting Booking, you can really split the traffic quite a lot and still be significant. So that was one line, and then the other idea was, okay, maybe we can do something else. We can do something that is also representative of the quality of the apartment overall, and that's where the idea of this star rating came up. Some people said, okay, but this is the same as the you already have the review score, so why do you need another? That's already your star rating for the apartment. That's not correct, because the review score is an expression of the subjective experience when you stay in the accommodation, not the objective quality of the accommodation, which is what we were trying to achieve. And we couldn't just use the stars system from the hotel, because that's regulated. It's not as simple. There's actual rules that control how stars are applied in the different countries. So you couldn't just lift that and put it there. Also, it would have made some people very mad, because also hotels and short-term rentals are not really that fun of each other, that fond of each other. And so there was this problem. So we started with this idea. We tested it with some property managers first. So we went to them and we said, okay, we have this idea. What do you think? What are some of the problems? And a couple of the things that I just told you came up from these discussions, came out of those discussions. Then there was another problem which also came out of this discussion, which was linked to the fact that this system, so a 3 square is actually a little square with a circle inside. We never came up with an actual name for the symbol, by the way. I will call it square. So a 3 square apartment in Amsterdam might not be the same thing exactly in terms of features of a 3 square apartments in Oslo or in Cairo. That's because in terms of features, the air conditioning, for example, might be really, really important in Cairo, nice to have in Amsterdam, and not important at all, at least until now, in Oslo, right? So we also had this problem that we had to come up with something that would work everywhere, which is always a challenge for a company as big as Booking. And we solved that actually by developing this rating is assigned by a machine learning algorithm, essentially, that looks at a number of features. The 400 in total features, I think, fed into the algorithm. Of course, at least it was like this when it was designed. I don't know how it is now. And then basically it assigns the rating comparing the features of that particular house or apartment compared to other houses in the neighborhood, right? So to control for this bias. So a 3 square apartment in Amsterdam might not have exactly the same features as a 3 square apartment in Tel Aviv. Then, of course, we designed and developed the solution, and as always, we tested it in A/B fashion. So we just tried, and it was very, very positive on conversion, which was obviously very good for us. It also reduced the inbound to customer service, which is what we were looking for. So overall, it was a great success, and the feature went full on. So how the idea came from, basically from other industries and from the feedback from the clients. How did we test it? We basically developed it together with the clients, with the partners, and then we just put it live essentially and measured the intended results, and that's how we knew it was successful.
Okay. And a question related to this process was about understanding how the stakeholders were involved in all this process. So did you have any regular meetings, or did they took part in the ideation phase, just to understand how they are involved in all this?
In the internal stakeholder.
Internal stakeholder in this particular case, yes.
Yeah, so in Booking, the home division was organized as a business unit essentially. So you could see it as a small company within the company. It was around 300 people in total. So I guess it's the size of a big company in normal terms. But within Booking was the probably how many are you in We Road? I think maybe around this number, right?
No, a bit less, I guess, 160, 150 more or less.
Okay. So anyway, it was basically this size. And we were organized in product development was organized essentially in teams, of course, and then each team was belonging to a segment, like I was telling you before, right? I was ultimately responsible for the professional segment of the product management and product marketing side, and therefore basically within these tribes, within these groups, there was a constant alignment on what we are developing, what is our North Star, how do we know that this is impacting. We had a very fancy diagram of a fishbone, which is something you might have heard or seen somewhere, where you had all the stories and everything that each team was doing that was feeding in one bone, of the big fish bone that at the head, that was the main metric. And so everything that was done in coordination, like this, essentially with constant. We had recurring business unit meetings. We had, of course, the stand-ups. We had the smaller groups that were meeting with each other, together with the Booking also as quite a large sales force, and there was a team that was specifically involved in, it was called implementation team, that was involved in actually rolling out these changes to the market. And specifically with the home, we had the luck of having a very good relationship also with this team, so we would also involve sometimes the local workforce to get feedback also on some of the ideas. This is in general, not for this specifically, but in general, this is how it worked.
There's a question in the chat, say how many people were involved overall and how long it took you from the idea to the first A/B test.
So how many people involved in it was one team essentially that developed this. So 6 people, more or less, like the core team that was actually working on this feature. Of course, the overall size of the people involved was bigger, but the overall team is around 6 people. And it took, I don't remember exactly, I would say 6 months approximately from the idea to the first A/B test. Because,
Thank you.
yeah, well, that's not the only thing that the team did in these 6 months, of course, because there are many other things that were happening at the same time, but approximately 6 months. This is also something, by the way, that we try to do, obviously, on a much smaller scale now at Data Appeal. We try to have the team working on different horizons, right? There is, it's the same team, but a portion of the team is working on implementing stuff that we are going to do today or tomorrow, and then, let's say, in another moment or in parallel, we are also trying to work on stuff that's going to happen in 2, 3, or 6 months, just to balance both. We tried, by the way, to split this Booking. At a certain point, I was part of a team that was called Innovate in Booking.com, a very happily named team. It lasted around a year, that experiment, and ultimately didn't really work, because in order to have effective innovation, you still need to be connected with the real business. Otherwise, unless you have a specific project, I would say, that you're doing that is really well defined, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. If you just want to have continuous innovation, I think it's much easier to do it within the normal teams, because they know much better, like the customer, how it works, and the feedback is just easier. Plus, if you call one team Innovate, then basically everybody wants to do innovation. So automatically everyone who's not in the Innovate team is like why are they doing the innovation and I am not, which is also not a very good idea from a people perspective.
Okay, there's another question. This is in the Slido, but then I will leave everyone to ask any other. How do you manage the launch of a new product? So is there a testing phase? How do you do testing? Is there something like a back bashing moment together with a larger team?
So of course it's very different compared to the size, right? So right now I'm going to talk about what we're doing in Data Appeal, and then I'm going to go back to the example before in Booking, because it's very different. In Data Appeal at the moment, we are rebuilding one of our core products that is basically a product that allows, at the simplest level, individual property owners or managers of group of properties to essentially manage their online reputation, right? So you receive reviews across multiple channels. It's helpful to have a place that aggregates all these reviews and where you can see your sentiment. You have some semantic analysis of what's going on, and then you can reply to everyone from the platform, and you can have a lot of let's say other use cases around the data on that same platform. So this product we are now rebuilding from scratch, essentially, because it was originally built as travel appeal, specifically for hotels, essentially individual hotels. But then we realized that this is also something that's useful, for example, for retailers, for everyone that has a large presence of physical points on the map. They all get the reviews now on the map, so it's helpful for them as well to be able to do this. And of course, the scale is very different, because managing 20 hotels or even 100 or 1,000 hotels is very different than managing thousands of outlets for retail. So we had to rebuild it, but it also gave us the opportunity to kind of rethink how the product is done. And we are now doing an alpha program with some of these retailers, because it's B2B. And essentially we've involved 7 or 8, I don't remember exactly, 7 or 8 clients, basically in the super early phase. So we've designed the outline of the product, and then very early we just went to them and we asked them literally, this is what we're doing, what do you think? Give us feedback. If you want to participate in this almost co-development phase, you can enroll in this alpha program and help us build it. And that's what we are doing essentially for this year until the summer. We've involved these partners in this alpha to gather the feedback. And you could consider this already to be part of the launch, because they are aware that this is coming. They obviously talk to other people, so we get the advantage of some buzzwords and some, let's say, word of mouth communication without really doing any activity to promote this. Of course, when the product will get out of the alpha phase and the beta phase and it will be available, there will be an actual launch. Because it's a product, B2B is tied to an event. There are 2 big events in travel, as you know, TTG in October in Italy, and then ITB in Berlin in March. We've missed ITB, of course, and so we are targeting TTG for the launch this year. And we will then do something there, which I don't really know yet what is going to be, but there will be some activity done there. This is for a company of the size of Data Appeal. Usually works like this. For Destination AI, which is another product that we are building, which is what I was telling you before around GPT. We kind of did the opposite there, in the sense that our CEO went and already announced that this product is launching at an event in Dubai last week. But we are still building and testing the product at the moment. It was helpful, however, for us to do the launch, the announcement a little bit before, because he also helped us gather the feedback on, because we showed different features, right? We showed a video that had different options, let's say. And so gathering, even though it's only anecdotal information, but gathering the information on which of these features is more interesting or resonated best in the communication is actually helpful for us now that we are scrambling to build it on time to know how to prioritize. In Booking is a completely different story, because Booking is obviously a company that is a listed company, so outside communication is very regulated correctly, rightfully, and therefore when you do the launch, you really need to involve a lot of people. You really need to involve PR. You really need to get your communication correct. You cannot make a claim if the claim is not really a claim, right? Sometimes you could make a claim and you're not really sure. But if you're making a claim in Booking, you have to be really sure that what you're saying is correct, because otherwise it's a big problem. And so for the star rating, what we essentially did through all these hurdles, so with a lot more complication, but it was essentially the same. So we had some teasers. There are a series of events in which we participated, and we basically first tested the waters that we were doing this at some of the smaller events to see what was happening. And then we had a big launch campaign that was planned that had everything from blog posts, videos, out-of-home advertisements, really the whole thing, digital advertisements. All the channels were activated, all with the same message that was very coordinated. And I think you do this quite well, by the way, in WeRoad. I think in terms of marketing, I think you really do activate a lot of channels quite well. I don't know if there is somebody from marketing in the call, but definitely I think it's done well. And then basically we had then the big launch moment where all in the same moment, like it happens with all product launches, right? We just saw the Apple product launch, but basically it's the big event where there is the announcement, and then at the same time as actually I was making the announcement on the stage in that particular case, then there was the articles that were written, there was the posts on LinkedIn, there was the advertisement that was going out. So it was all coordinated to basically get the maximum of that wave, right? To ride that wave as much as possible, because obviously you're going to get a lot of attention in that moment. And yeah, so that's how it works. It was also a funny moment because at a certain point there was an article on this travel website that was covering this, and so the front page of this website, he had a picture of Brian Chesky with an article, then a picture of Glenn Fogel, who's the CEO of Booking, with another article, and then there was a picture of me with this thing of the quality rating. So I took a screenshot and I sent it to my mom saying, look, I've made it. And she was like, who are those people? Like, why? What is this? Like, are these your friends? And I was like, oh, you're missing the point. Anyway, that was the story.
Okay. So I don't have any other question in the Slido, but I would ask the audience if you have any other questions that didn't come up in the Slido, feel free to ask and go ahead.
Going back to the stakeholder management or relation with the stakeholders, I don't think it's likely based on the kind of company you work for, but have you ever had the occasion to work with stakeholders that are not, let's say, accustomed or prepared to work according to the mindset of continuous innovation, agile, and so on? Did you have the occasion, and how did you manage those kind of, let's say, old school stakeholder?
Are you saying that some people might not be accustomed to the agile way of working?
Maybe.
No. Of course it happens. And I don't know, I don't have a perfect answer. Of course, I don't have an answer that works everywhere. I think
I'm not asking how to, in your experience, how did you manage it if it happened?
I think it's with communication and transparency, basically, because if the expectation is that the roadmap is going to take a certain amount of time and then things might change, and you have two problems. You have the changes that are unexpected, so something comes in and then it disrupts everything, and this is very damaging to the tech team, because obviously they are like, we were working on something, now we need to work on something else. Why don't you just make up your mind, right? It's very damaging. But also the other thing that could happen is that the timelines will, become longer, and then you'll be late, and then the sales team is going to say, well, we have nothing to sell because you haven't built what you said you were building already. And to me, this whole thing is managed with transparency, essentially, right? So you just need to be super aware and super transparent. If somebody comes in and says, we were working on building a chair and now we need to do the table, you could say, yes, okay, we can do the table, but there is a cost that is associated with doing the table. It means that the chair will not be ready on time, right? And then it's a strategic decision to decide we want to do the chair first or the table first. However, then the other super important thing is that you have to be able to measure everything, right? Because if you are not measuring, and I know maybe it's like obvious to a lot of people, but in my experience, at least, a lot of people say that they are measuring stuff and then they are not really measuring stuff, or they are not looking at the measurement. So I think this is also something that's quite important, because when we launched, actually, for example, right, we launched a feature that is an autoresponder to replies with now at Data Apparel with GPT. And in GPT, you have the option to customize the tone of voice if you want to reply in a way that's funny or polite or whatever. So for quite sometimes we had a discussion on how many tone of voices should we have. Should we allow to choose like 4, 5, 10, all? I don't know. Thankfully, when we've implemented, and really we had no arguments because it was a new feature and nobody knew what to do. But thankfully, when we've implemented that feature, we put in tracking in place. So we knew how many people were actually using it in the MVP. And we've noticed that basically no one was changing the tone of voice. So we then decided that it was not worth investing more time in that particular feature. Of course, then somebody can come and say, it's a chicken and egg problem. So are people not using the feature because the feature is not good? Or are people not, you know what I mean, right? Would they have used the tone of voice if there had been more tone of voices available? But at least you have a starting point that's actually based on numbers and not on opinions, because that's also quite dangerous, I think. And then it's also about building a relationship. Again, it's very basic, right? But it's building a relationship on trust and on people. When I onboard new product managers, I always say this to them in the very first days or weeks, is like the single most important thing that you need to do as a product manager. You need to achieve a good balance with your team, right? You need to be accepted and be able to work together effectively as people with a team. Because if you don't do that, then it doesn't, nothing else will work, basically.
Nothing else can work, yeah.
And for the stakeholders, it's the same. If you're not able to establish a minimum level of connection and trust, then everything else is very, very hard. Unless you are the person to which people are not able to establish the connection to, in which case then is another problem.
Okay, thank you. And if there is no other question, I have another one.
Go.
In terms of strategy, first a practical question: if you use OKRs, And
No.
What you don't use OKR, and why don't you use OKR? Is there's a reason, or just because you don't believe that it can work?
We used OKRs at booking, we used OKR amusement, obviously, and we don't use OKR at Data Appeal. At Data Appeal, we don't use OKR because we just didn't get the time to implement them yet. Basically, we just have too much fire everywhere,
Yeah.
and so. As, by the way, this is the official fire mascot. I don't know if you know this. I bring him in every time it's needed. So that we just didn't have the time. In booking and amusement, we use them. I think they are helpful. They can be very helpful as long as you don't mistake the tool with the objective, right? So the objective, because I think what could happen with the OKRs is that you get so obsessed in actually writing the OKRs that then you forget about what the OKR is about. It's just about that. And then another danger that I see is that this was true especially at booking. If you become too religious about the OKRs, then you become so closed in your silo of your OKR that then you don't see anything else. And to use an extreme example is like, you are drowning, you're dying next to me, but my OKR is to arrive there, so I don't care about anything else. I will not stop because my OKR is to go there. And I think that's missing the point of the overall objective. Plus, third thing around the OKRs that in my experience sometimes doesn't really work, other than doing it wrong. So say that you do the OKRs and then you do the output and not the outcome. But assuming you're doing it correctly, the other thing that will not make it work is probably if each team does it separately. Like, because I think it's more helpful if you try to have an overall company OKR, and then you try to break this down in the different teams, so that, because otherwise the risk is then you have one group that's going in one direction. It's going in another direction, and it's not. But yeah, it has to be done properly, because otherwise the risk is that you would then do things just because you have to do them, and you don't know why, and you would. I mean, I've seen things that were launched on days that were clearly the wrong date to launch those things, and the only reason why they were launched on that date is because somebody had an OKR that had to be launched before a certain date, right? So,
sure.
To me, that's kind of defeating the purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Do you use OKR, by the way? Do you use OKRs in Windows?
OKR, we introduced OKR about the second year of We Wrote Life. I think we started with the right step, but then we because we lack of time and so on, we start doing OKR the wrong way, like a list of initiatives and more or less related to some outcome, but not measurable, so it became like an exercise that you have to do every quarter, but was not useful. Now we're trying to get back to which are the objective, the goal that we want to reach, and then avoid the list of.
I think every quarter is too soon, is too short. I always said that. I think that doing an OKR for every quarter there's not enough time. Basically,
especially for product and digital, because in tech also, because you probably have stuff that goes for
maybe for sales.
Impossible to.
Maybe for sales or for support, it could make sense to have quarterly objectives, but for product and tech, I think a quarter is just too short. Basically, by the time you decided the OKR for the quarter, then the quarter is finished, and then you have to decide.
Also because probably you can have the time to think, develop, release a feature, and see if the feature had the impact that you supposed to.
No, because a quarter is 6 sprints. In a quarter, there are 6 sprints. So one of them is going to go because people are going to go on holiday at some point. So it's already 5. Then one is invested in doing the OKRs. One is invested in redoing the OKRs.
Yeah.
So already you have half.
Yeah, correct. That's true. And talking about always talking about strategy. Anyway, you have to have in mind a roadmap especially when you think about a product, not just a feature. And you have to have in mind which are the pieces that you need to put together, and probably is completely different in your experience from Bookings.com and your current company. But how often do you work on the roadmap, and how often do you review it, and how often do you share with, I don't know, stakeholders or other department involved in this process? It's something that you do, you don't think is useful, or how do you manage it?
I don't think it's that different, actually. I think the roadmap is something that you're constantly working on, basically.
Yeah.
You work on it all the time. Right now, I have a recurring meeting every week with the CTO of the company where we review everything that's on the roadmap. In Booking, of course, I didn't have the meeting with the CTO, but I had the meeting with the person responsible.
Weekly meeting to review the roadmap?
It is weekly, yeah. And then every Monday, we also have a meeting with all the senior stakeholders in the company now, where we basically review where we stand also every Monday for more tactical stuff. And then we have one meeting every month where we take a bit more time and we review the overall more strategic initiatives. But it is something that we work on it all the time. So it's not something that, of course, in this particular case, right, when I joined Data Appeal, there was no roadmap, so there was nothing as such. So I've built the first edition, let's say, but then after that, so obviously that was one moment where you start, but then after that is something that continues to happen all the time. And the strategy is, and for the value proposition, by the way, not the strategy, for the value proposition is also the same in both in Booking and in Musement to an extent, and also in Data Appeal. I was really involved in crafting the value proposition part. I don't know if you've used or know any of the value proposition frameworks. The Strategizer one is one of the most popular. I have the book. No, it's the other room, but anyway, it's something that I find always really, really useful. So a value proposition in a nutshell, I use this framework that is essentially 6 steps. Is borrowed from marketing, but it's applicable also to product. And I think is always a useful framework to have in mind. So you start with your target audience that you have to define really well, who you're talking to. You've step 1. Step 2, you have to gather insights on that target audience. And an insight is not only an observation, is an observation that is coupled with an hypothesis with regards to why that observation has happened. Step 3 is you have to look at alternatives. So how is that currently solved? How is that observation? Obviously, from the observation, you get the jobs to be done and the needs and the rest, right? Obviously, that stuff you have to see how is currently solved, the alternative part, and then you start to position yourself as benefit. So what can I say to this that's hopefully going to be better than the alternatives? So that's your core value proposition, let's say, the benefit statement. And then you break down the benefit statements in the reasons to believe. So if I say my platform is the most efficient platform for you to access 360 degrees data, then that's a nice claim. But then I have to really have all the features that really make it true, right? And then the sixth step would be the superiority claim, which is kind of the marketing bit of how you communicate this. But these first 5 steps, I think, are very helpful also for product to sort of organize how you're doing things, right? At the moment, we are saying we want to enable sustainable growth. This means enable more efficiency, completeness, and we have the different pillars. And then for each pillar, we have, okay, we say that we want to be more efficient. So what does that mean? It means that this, and this, and you have all the features under that. I think is also helpful to then color things this way in the roadmap, so you know how things.
Thank you.
And of course, somebody's going to come and say we did this is all very nice, but then we have to do something else. But
you have a plan, at least.
But at least you knew where you were going before the road.
Good. Thank you.
Is there any other question from other people? Don't be shy if you have any.
Exactly. I can't believe that our product manager had no question to ask.
Who's in the call? Who are the people in the call?
Right now, let me check. 18 people, and I would say that we have
a mix.
1, 2, 3 product manager.
So can I ask you a question?
But I'm
the developer.
Can I ask you a question then?
Go.
What's your biggest challenge in product at the moment in We Road?
I don't know who want to answer. First of all, we have different products we are taking care of, and I would split them in 2 based on the scope of those. One is the part of our product that is end user facing, and on the side, I think the biggest challenge is to move from a mindset that we call the bootstrap mindset that we had at the beginning, where we have to work with a very small team doing everything in a very, very fast way, but not, let's say, strategic and controlled way, to move from that mindset to mindset where we are, it's quite obvious to say, but more data-driven and more able to balance the effort that we put in place and the outcome that we want to achieve. And on the other side, we have a huge part of our team that is working on a product that is not customer facing, but is crucial to enable all the processes that are unique in our business model. And that's very hard. It's very challenging because it costs a lot. And it's very hard to have all the company on board in understanding why we have to put all that effort in something that is not directly contributing to the conversion rate or to the customer acquisition, or something that is what we think could help us to grow. So
I think
that's my opinion. Maybe Jasmine that or Seba different point of view, but I think that the 2 challenge on a high level that we have.
I think from my point of view, this whole product thing is quite new, right? So I think we are all to a large extent facing the same challenge. If I was saying before that I do this teaching at the master for TAG, and it's around 25 people every time, right? And I've done it, I said, around 10 times. So it's 200 people, more or less. And all of them have this similar challenge. So I don't think it's something that's specific to one company. To be fair, though, when I started working in product in Italy, which was the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, really this whole thing was not even there, right? So the fact that already in less than 2.5 years, 3 years, we are get through in the middle of the pandemic, we are actually getting to, having this discussion. I think it's already a great step, right? Because if I look at outside as well, even in booking, I mean, in 2013, when I started booking, there was no thing.
Concept about, yeah.
The actual training for product owners was, you as to be a good product owner, you only need to know one word, and that word is no. To everyone, you only say one thing, no. And that was the training on how to deal with stakeholders, basically. So I think from there we've made quite a lot of steps, but of course not there yet, right? Maybe if you look at the Americans, they are a lot more forward than this. However, based on my experience, when I was booking, I was interviewing people that were working at very big companies, very famous companies, American companies as well, and the challenges are there as well, right? So I think it's the nature of the job, unfortunately, or fortunately, because it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So if there's any other question, I guess we can leave you, Alessandro. Thanks a lot for your sharing super insights, super useful, I would say, for us, especially in this moment where we are rebuilding things from scratch as well. And
no, sorry, just
okay.
The meeting UI confused me.
Too much
buttons. We need to complain with Google for the UI.
No,
to be fair, it's true. I always click on that hand
because the raise your hand, the icon, you want to clap and you just click there and you raise your hand instead.
It was a pleasure for me as well to participate. Thanks, Jasmine, for the invitation. You'll find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect. If you want to listen to the podcast, feel free to rate it 5 stars. That's it.
For now, I just subscribed. Then I give you a rating because I want to be fair and honest.
Thanks a lot.
Grazie,
Thank you, everyone.
Grazie.
Ciao, grazie.
Ciao.
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 Ciao, grazie.